Marty Weintraub. Marty and I start by discussing his background in marketing and advertising. We then dove into psychographic marketing, how it impacted the 2016 election, and how it's changed since then, and much more. We also touch on how ChatGPT is being used, where it's going in the future, and how it impacts marketing. With that, please enjoy my conversation with Marty Weintraub. Hello and welcome to the Arsnake Show. Today I have with me Marty Weintraub. How are you?
I'm amazing. Thank you. Robert, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for asking. It's good to see you. I only get to see you a couple times a year.
It's good to see you too.
I know. Still above ground, just like me.
Keep my credit cards in our RFID safe pocket.
Like that would stop me.
Yeah.
Come on.
Too fun.
So welcome to Austin. What brings you here?
I'm speaking at Pubcon, which is a quintessential digital marketing conference that most often takes place at this scale in Las Vegas, but the organizers live here, and it's a little more post-pandemic friendly than Las Vegas is. So
interesting.
Speaking at a conference and attending, and here to be with you.
Oh, great. What are you speaking about, if you don't mind my asking?
I spoke about automating LinkedIn and research and Sales Navigator because we figured out how to hack the shirt out of that engine and use it to make lists of people, remain GDPR compliant with LinkedIn as a firewall where they keep the data. They could get sued by Europe or whoever, but we won't. And then do targeting for outreach, inreach, inbound PR, as well as ads to lists of people where it's one-to-one. LinkedIn is one of the only channels where you can have an actual list of the actual humans that you're marketing to stored in a channel as a firewall and run ads to those people if you know how. And it's not LinkedIn ads. It's using the organic section of LinkedIn to power targeting through some whirling dervish sort of Rubik's Cube stuff. I'm speaking about that.
Out of curiosity, is it because the GDPR thing kind of rang a bell? Are you saying that they have like sort of user tokens and that's how they're referencing them and you don't get to see who they really are, but you get to reference them? Or is it a cohort? Is it just a lookalike audience?
We see who they are because we use the organic targeting module in Sales Navigator, which is essentially LinkedIn's organic search in a more expensive product. And then we know how to use Europe-based GDPR compliant email harvest products that pull it down real time from internet associations and don't keep lists, and then bring that back into LinkedIn as a custom audience. Very geeky, yes, but what it means is we never have to retain data. LinkedIn can get sued all they want, but we won't. It's arguable that all of these platforms somehow violate CCPA and GDPR, and they're just willing. I mean, Microsoft is willing to pay whatever it is, and Facebook, Meta is willing to pay whatever it is, but we don't keep lists, and until they shut down those channels, we'll do whatever those channels allow us to do in the channels. So when I say firewall, I mean, I don't really care how they process it. It's not my shit.
That's fantastic. I had never really thought about, from an advertiser's perspective, it's kind of nice to have this sort of middle tier out there who take on all the liability of collection, and it's not just collection; it's also sorting. I think that's the real problem. I don't think really people care so much about the collection; it's the ability to quickly search it. That's the problem.
Right. I mean, in Sales Navigator, which is a very advanced search engine, you can go to one box that searches the entire profile and write a Boolean query. And then you have a dozen other filters that are normal sorts of business filters, like how big is the company you're targeting that these people work for, the industry, lots of stuff. And so you can write an or Boolean query, come up with a list of people, have third-party tools that also retain the data instead of you, parse that to custom audiences that LinkedIn can in turn use in their ads platform. So you bypass the targeting in LinkedIn entirely, except for the custom audience feature. But I mean, the FTC or the European Union would need to sue every one of LinkedIn's clients, customers, advertising customers, or every one of Meta's custom audience customers. Like for us as an agency, what's most important is that we don't retain data and we don't keep any lists. But the channels offer us the ability and they take on the liability, in our opinion. I'm not a lawyer, so nobody should take this as sage legal advice, but we're comfortable buying freaking LinkedIn ads and Facebook ads.
That makes sense.
We're comfortable with that.
So I never thought to ask you this before, but once upon a time we had, back when Bit Discovery was a private entity before we got acquired, we had the ability to figure out what sort of technologies were being run at any given company. So we were talking with LinkedIn early on, although I don't think they really saw our vision for it.
Probably not.
For the ability for you to ask questions of, I want to speak to only people who have actively employed these products, not just purchased them, but actually are using them in production.
That's interesting.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So from a technology advertising perspective, it was another layer on top of it, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Well, you can, not in Sales Navigator, but in LinkedIn's organic search, which is a shadow of the abilities in Sales Navigator, and it costs 30 or 40% of what Sales Navigator costs across a year. There is a module in LinkedIn's native, even free search, where you can find the technologies that companies proffer, that they sell.
Right.
But in LinkedIn's ad module, you can also target people who work for companies who are interested in usage of some very geeky technologies and platforms, and that won't get us where you want to be, that they use it in the creation thereof. That, yeah, I wish we had that.
Yeah, and we could have even gone deeper because I know the geo as well. So I could say, carve it out to this exact kind of manager who manages these types of things in this very specific region. I mean, I could have got down to the very specific person very easily with that technology.
You can kind of find that with skills targeting, but you have to scrape for that. So
right. Well, not that anyone's above scraping.
I do not know what you speak of. I know not what you speak of.
So we went down a rabbit hole already, and I want to get back to all
Sorry
of that.
about that.
No, this is actually what I wanted to talk to you about. So we'll get there in a second. But can we back up a little bit?
Yes.
How did you get into marketing? Like, how did this all start? How did you decide that this is what you wanted to do?
I had a beautiful 25-year career as a musician. Starting out literally going to Berklee College of Music in Boston. I dropped out after 7 semesters, 1 semester short, and that was some combination of dating and marijuana.
Which percentage?
I don't know. It was all pretty unhealthy. But literally, I blew off college on almost no notice, listed myself with a referral
Was that
service.
a pun, sir? Blowing it off?
Too funny. I cracked me up. No, I'm not quite that sophisticated. So just one day I was a student at Berklee College of Music, and the next day I was packing all my shit into a crate and going to join a band that was based out of Minneapolis.
What kind of band?
A cover band playing forgettable rock and roll in bad hotels. It's pretty bad. but I don't know. I like, if you look at my Facebook profile, you'll see pictures of all this big hair and shit. There were gold lame shorts and Robert Smith kind of eye makeup. And I was into the whole early 80s glam thing at the time. Like, I look sort of like a ugly version of my late mother. Not quite as cute. Not quite as cute. So one minute I was at the airport and my dad's like crying because I just blew off college after 7 semesters. And I was getting stoned before I went in, so I was high enough when I got to the airport. And the next minute I'm landing in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Why there, out of curiosity?
Because I listed myself with a professional musicians referral service that just lined up musicians, and I was definitely a musician. And at the time, actually, at Berklee are some of the most famous musicians in jazz today. Like my schoolmates were amazing, incredible musicians. And just the place I picked, I picked a job with a cover band, and I joined them, and I went to Minneapolis. And then the first gigs were in Fargo, North Dakota. And remember, I grew up in the Northeast near Boston. And so I arrived in Minneapolis, and they picked me up, and I stayed at a forgettable strip hotel, like motel, motel. Saw some very provocative things through the window by accident while I was walking. So my mind was partway blown. And then the next day we drive to Fargo, freaking North Dakota. And after like 30 or 40 miles of sunflower fields, I just remember thinking, what if I have to go to a hospital? What if I have to go to a hospital? So spent those years like playing in sort of cover bands and changing bands and improving the bands and growing as a musician. And then I hit Minneapolis and decided to live there in 1984, right as Purple Rain happened. And the drinking age was 18, and there were 200 bands that made a couple grand a week playing in hundreds of bars and ballrooms around the region. And so I grew from cover bands to more bands that had some notoriety, and engineered a lot of hours at Paisley Park during those years. And yeah, so then that led to invitations to do jingles. So I spent some years doing jingles, like I could do one for you, maybe later, maybe after I drink a little more water. I could do one for you. But I wrote some jingles and co-wrote some jingles, and my mentor was Senior Vice President Creative of an agency called Carmichael Lynch. And they had some very, very big accounts. And he was doing some jobs, and he invited me in. And so pretty soon, seemingly they respected just my general creativity, and I found myself at the creative table for jobs that were not about music. And one thing led to another, and then that was generation one of, remember, the flash technology and early digital editing, and we were burning CDs that cost $70 a piece. And I mean, we're talking about like mid 80s. And so that just led to deeper involvement in the advertising industry. Then right in the middle of that, 5 songwriters I was working with and my business partner at the time got a deal with Polygams. So I took all that out of control, habitual use of medicinals, and all my angst of being a musician and followers, and because I made a lot of friends in those days, a lot of friends, and moved myself to Hollywood, which was just, I mean, that was lots of money, no accountability, lots of attention, just the seeds of an epic business crash. Came back to Minneapolis in like the early 90s, and went out into the woods and made recordings of wolves and loons. And that led to spending several years traveling around recording dolphins in the semi-wild. And so when you first saw those kiosks pop up in Target where you could press a button and listen to the loons or the wolves and such, I was helping to make those records, and I made the dolphin ones, and we sold a lot of CDs. And that was my bridge, because the first multivariate testing I ever did was how far the motion detector on those kiosks tripped what sound, loon or wolves, against Gimroy, which is cubic inches of 3D retail space in Walmart. And so we sold a lot of CDs. I got married to the wrong person. I moved to Duluth, Minnesota, and I took a job as creative director of the CBS.
Why Duluth?
Because I've always been deeply into the outdoors, and it's always been where I went to heal. And above Duluth, Minnesota, there's an area called the Boundary Waters, which is hundreds and hundreds of miles of unaffected, paddle-only streams and lakes and rivers. And if you look at a map of northern Minnesota and look up, it's pretty much a straight shot to the Yukon with nothing there. So there's timber wolves, and so I had been going there. I've been going there for ever and ever and ever. So I moved to Duluth, and I took a job as creative director of the CBS affiliate there. And I literally made their first website with my hands, with Adobe PageMill, I think.
Dreamweaver?
It was a little early for Dreamweaver, but I did buy Macromedia Dreamweaver 1 and use it and went, whoa. But remember Net Objects Fusion? That was a long time ago.
You're dating yourself, Marty.
I have a fool for a partner, dating myself. So that was really neat, because that year at that television station, I made the logo. I did the logo. I designed the logo. I did the background graphics for the news. I wrote the music for the news. I made car commercials, got myself more involved in the business of broadcast, and they sent me around the country doing the same thing for other network affiliates.
Oh, interesting.
And then as the broadcast industry began to wane in like the mid 90s or so, because already the internet was going kind of nuts, already, and we had unnatural penetration because we were a television station and we could serialize content. So I knew more than any natural human should know about the internet at that time, and we had audiences. I got out of that business and started working for a venerable regional advertising agency as their director of, quote, interactive marketing, and it just goes from there. So it was a natural transition based on creativity, opportunity, loss, wit, my love of nature, timing and such.
You actually remind me a lot of another friend of mine who followed a very similar path through music, doing a lot of just, I have some band promo CD I need to make. So I need my own graphics. I need my own, this and that. And, I got to make my flyers. And it just, out of necessity and creativity and just having access to a computer for mixing purposes, it just kind of turns into this other thing.
Oh, yeah. I was a Commodore 64 Atari music sequencer in those days. When you're a musician, you get this bunker mentality where you never really trust that the next piece of revenue is going to come. And that's stressful, and it serves you extremely well. And so my dad has always said that he learned everything he knows from what someone else was going to charge him to do it. And since I'm like you, like I'm always forward in tech and I'm intrigued by tech. And so I was always a little bit ahead of what people who were practitioners in fields that didn't move as fast, like advertising. So I gained this knack of making myself obsolete after I got paid a bunch for it. Great example. In the late 80s, you could make CDs on a burner that cost $1,500 to $3,000 that you could sell to somebody for $70. So one year I made $30,000 selling CDs to advertising agencies, which was a fair amount to me at that time in my life. And then when I understood that Hewlett Packard was going to put a CD burner that cost about $100 in every computer that they made, by going to CES and learning that before they knew, I charged them like $5,000 to show them how to do it and moved on to the next tab, early adoption, and began a process in all of my
Was that
careers.
iOmega zip drives, or what was next? I'm just teasing.
Actually, at that time and before that were SyQuest 20 meg removables. Remember those?
Yeah.
And then it was 40.
Yeah.
And now you're dating yourself.
Well, the reason I always say that's my one joke about those old types of media, because once the British government wanted to buy one of my books, and I'm like, sure, go ahead. It was MI5, I think. I'm like, sure, go ahead, buy it. I don't care. And they're like, well, we're going to send you our credit card number and you can charge it. And I'm like, we're doing what? And so
they're a freaking spy agency.
They literally sent me their credit card, and I'm like, okay. So I did it for them, just cause, right?
You didn't hack them just because you're a good soul.
I was trying to be nice. Well, also I was kind of convinced that they wanted me to hack them just to see what I would do. So I did it. I was nice, and then they responded back a day or so later. They're like, well, we tried to download it, but it wouldn't fit on a floppy drive. And I'm like, you need to go down to your most technical person and say, hey, I'm going to need an iOmega zip drive.
So funny.
Just see what they say. And I never heard from them again. I'm pretty sure that was...
the disastrous feeling, that awful sinking feeling when your 20 meg removable fails. Well, you could do a lot with 20 meg of data in those days. It was incredible.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, being a musician helped me, because I always wanted to be on top of the tech. Like as soon as I didn't have to carry around a Hammond B3 anymore, and the Korg synthesizer that I used a Leslie with Stell, the rotating speakers, sounded almost, not quite, but it was just much easier on my back and on the roadies and stuff. When you're a musician, you're always concentrating on the intersection of art and forward tech. And so I learned...
posture, apparently.
Yes. Too bad I wasn't quite so nice to my hearing. Yeah. Wasn't as nice to my hearing. So I learned a forward-thinking tech that I parlayed into revenue by always making as much money as I could, understanding that it was predictably obsolete, and finding the jumping off point about that. Can I tell you another story about that?
Of course.
So my first speaking engagement ever was in 2008 at Search Fest in Portland, Oregon. My dear friends in Portland, the SEM PDX people. And I've spoken and keynoted at many of their conferences since. And in fact, I will again this year. They're just some of my favorite people. And so Portland and me have a thing. And so Aimclear, there was like 4 years where we had the organic Google #1 unpersonalized result for reputation monitoring dashboard. Here's how that happened. We made like 6 figures 1 year at Aimclear, taking iGoogle dashboards, hacking filtered RSS feeds, either by scrape or as offered, because there was a lot more RSS segmented, every node of YouTube, like you get all kinds of stuff. So we were making these really intense reputation listening dashboards using iGoogle, and we charge clients, a fuck ton to do it. And then I understood that technology was making its way to the forefront, and there would be much less expensive tools, and that it would become Boolean. So in my speaking debut at SEM PDX, literally my first time as a speaker, I gave it away. I completely cannibalized our revenue. I went from having from having 6-figure revenue for making these iGoogle dashboards to having zero. And there was so much buzz from it that I had the #1 organic. Aimclear had the #1 organic for 4 years for reputation monitoring dashboard. So this notion for entrepreneurs about charge, plan your own obsolescence, give it away or get paid to teach and move on to the next thing means that you never have to worry about technological obsolescence, because your job is helping companies pivot to the next level of technology, and you will never be obsolete if that's what you do.
Interesting. Yeah, I've run into this a couple times where people will be comfortable saying all the special sauce on Twitter is usually where this all goes down, or presentations. And to me, when I first saw that all happening, I'm like, I just don't see the upside in doing that. It seems dangerous. You seem like you're cannibalizing your business, to your point. But the best response I heard is, I'm happy if everyone wants to follow me. Right.
Yeah. The people who are going to compete with you are going to do it anyway. And so you might as well have them drinking your Kool-Aid.
You might as well lead if they're willing to follow.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Because they're going to compete with you anyway. And to that point, for many years, people have been coming back and saying, oh, I saw you speak in Seattle at MozCon, and then I went out and made 20 million, and thank you very much. And I go, great. That's just great. Even today when I spoke, I told them things worth millions. At the same time, we've become a little more competitive in what we write. We're willing to say it to people that pay to go to conferences that we love. We're not so willing to write about it anymore.
Interesting. So you mentioned Aimclear. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your company, since we're on the topic?
Aimclear is 16 years old. We won Best Small Integrated Agency at the US Search Awards, which is, I actually really care about it because I judge the EU and UK search awards, and I know the level of case studies that compete. There are major companies and upstarts that are genius. There's very little chaff that goes along with that bounty of wheat with the search awards. So they're actually very hard to win in America and in Europe.
How do you win them? What's the process?
You have the best case studies, and you write the best case studies. Like you have to, if you have 2 case studies that are equal in what you've accomplished for your stakeholders or your company or your client, and one of them just really understands how to write the case study, that one will win. Like there has to be baked in respect for the judges. You have to follow the rules. Mostly you just have to answer the questions, and you have to have a great case study. So we made Inc. 5000 6 years in a row, which was hard because it's 3 year over 3 year top line revenue beauty contest. A top place to work in Minnesota. It's a boutique. It's 24 people with a redonkulously wonderful lifestyle. We're based in Minnesota, in Duluth and St. Paul. We have an office in St. Paul. I didn't know that. Yeah. And I live my life between a cabin at the end of the Gunflint Trail and the Boundary Waters, where it's a dark zone and I can photograph my northern lights. And I've been going there since I was a young man. And Duluth and St. Paul. And St. Paul for its proximity to MSP, the airport. Mayo Clinic. It's 70 miles from Mayo Clinic, which has become more important to me as we'll talk.
Sure. Yeah.
And so Aimclear is an integrated marketing agency, means we're always concerned with how things work together. If we're doing something that's about branding, we'll tell you where and how and 7 different nodes where you're making money with it. We're a channel agnostic, paid and organic media company. And we're very special generalists. Like in the PR department, it was a network news director who did a 25-year PR career and is internationally relevant and somewhat renowned for crisis management and corporate and Marcom. And another guy who was nominated for a Pulitzer as an associate editor of the Chicago Tribune. And we're just that good in each corner. In our performance marketing department, we handle hundreds of millions in media spend. we're always wondering where the air goes in the balloon when we squeeze in one of the places. And so when companies come to us, we're more of a one-stop shop and there's an economy of scale to working with an integrated agency too, because we don't have to come up to speed on anything. So I founded Aimclear. I've mostly
How old is the company?
16 years.
Okay, wow.
About half of the original people still work at the company.
Wow.
The average length of employment is over 5 years amongst active employees. People just stay for a really long time. And the ones who have gone with our blessing after many years work for some of the biggest names in the world. And we've worked for some of the biggest names in the world. We spent the first dollar of paid social for Airbnb. We had 3 people embedded at Uber in San Francisco in their office for quite a long time. We've worked with 3M and Siemens and lots of marketing companies too. Like we've spent a lot of time marketing data to marketers who don't know what it does and don't know how to think about it or use it. Like, and those names are like SEMrush and Optimizer and companies like that. And I list a lot. Anything that I say to you today, I list publicly on my LinkedIn profile. Also, we've worked for some of the largest platforms in the world too. Etsy and eBay all over the world, and Gumtree and LinkedIn and others I can't say in a podcast, but
Sure.
very, 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 very large companies. So it's just been a really joyous ride. And now I don't think any founder ever feels like they're fully replaced, but I'd say the part I bring to the company now is I've just made more mistakes than any of them, more times than any of them
Something to be proud of, at least.
There comes a point in a process where the world gives you enough love back that it gets above any imposter syndrome that we all kind of naturally have at moments. And so for me now, there's just little moments where just for a minute, like in between things, I can embrace the concept of having just some wisdom by experience. So like that's my job. There's just, any company that's 24 people and has a founder, like it was certainly based on my personality. And,
of course.
and we've been able to
and
reproduce
you are a
that.
Personality.
Thanks, babe. I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I?
Nothing like you, my friend. I don't hold a candle.
Yes, you do. Yeah, you do. I feel safer in this world because I'm friends with you.
Oh, that's nice. So, a huge chunk of what I want to talk to you today about is psychographics. It's an area I know you focus a lot on, and there is some publicity about it, but frankly, I think it's magic to most people. So could you start by kind of defining what you think it is and kind of how it works, just at a high level, just so we can start the baseline conversation?
The baseline of that is very interesting, because if you ask what does classic demographics mean, and they would say location, age, gender, those very basic sorts of things about human population. Like go to Wikipedia and look and see what demographics means. But that's kind of interesting because in the early days of digital marketing, if you ever tried to target somebody by their age, so the question is, a psychographic is more about who somebody is at a deeper level. Excuse me. At a deeper level, so whereas demographics might be the nuts and bolts, the compulsories, the things about what generally about what people
like
are.
what the census might pull out or something.
That's an excellent example. Psychographics are more the things that they like, or affinities, proclivities, biases, beliefs, activities, behavioral attributes. And so I'm a search guy. Like I grew up in the search marketing industry to where we're trying to ascribe intent by the keywords that people use when they search. Like I'll get back around to psychographics by this method because it's arguable that search is part of a psychographic, especially these days where you can layer search and psychographics. And so I know that if somebody searches for brain surgeon or brain surgery, I don't really know what they want. They could be looking at a possible career or what they earn or just information about it. Or maybe they're concerned. Maybe they're shopping for a physician. I don't know. I don't know. That's the point. But if somebody searches for brain surgeon Milwaukee or brain surgery facility, clinic, hospital, practice, cures, like, well, cures not so much, but there's degrees of intent. And so in the early days of being me in digital marketing, I was really plugged into being able to understand, hey, where does that get transactional? Where do I know they want to do something, take an action that I might be selling? Then in November of 2007, a fateful month in the history of human beings was when Facebook released their platform for selling Viagra and spam. Wait, that's not really what it was, but that's what it was used for. That's what it was used for at first, a lot of spamming, but it was unbelievable because you could target people more for who they were and who they are. And so I was all over that. Literally the first week, Robert, the first week I was into Facebook ads. And one of my large clients at the time was a music recording school, a music production school in Minneapolis. And we were marketing to Music Production College, Minneapolis, close quote, music recording school, US, and things like that. And so I started targeting high school seniors who wanted to be rock stars and played guitar and were in affluent zip codes where mom and dad might shell out the $40K it costs for a 2-year degree or something like that. And it went bananas right away because it didn't cost very much. And so I was just on that immediately. And then as it developed and the ads platform developed, Facebook ads platform, which was absolutely the early harbinger of that kind of marketing, remembering, of course, that search marketing, people are asking a question. They're all the way engaged. They're going, answer this question for me. I'm shopping for this. Like they tell you, and it's now. It's right when they're now. Whereas display or social advertising is more interrupt kind of marketing. You know who they are and you interrupt whatever they're doing. And state of the art for interrupt marketing, banner advertising, was Google and Yahoo at the time, Yahoo Panama. And the state of the art targeting was placing banner ads in content that used certain words, a contextual targeting. And this just smoked that. It just completely smoked it. So as that evolved, the next most significant development in the history of the psychographics were 2 words, one with 2 letters and one with 3 letters. The first word was or. O-R.
And then and.
Yes, because if you go, they like salami and they like lox and bagels. That's way different than they like salami or they like lox and bagels, because example number 2 expands the targeting bucket. Example number 1 narrows the bucket. And Facebook just really turned the world upside down between 2008, 2009, and 2016 when they began to dismember that, which is another conversation that we can have. In those years, they built the ad platform to be so deep that you could target our honored military veterans based on being a retired military veteran, making enough money that they're overqualified for their small house in a moderate neighborhood, and target them with a VA mortgage with an ad that says you proudly served your country and now our banks can serve you in upgrading your home. So psychographics and our ability to narrow audiences and pile on the and operator, this and this and this, and their house is this big and their income is this big, and this and this and this, was about a 5-year privacy bubble that we will never see again. Not ever again, not like that. Where you could just put together these dramatic, like I built out targets that go search Aimclear blog for lunatic political fringe. And we documented throughout those years some of the insane things you could target. I think I'll target all of the nuclear scientists that work in Russia, who are chronically underpaid and angry. Like, just insane shit. Crazy. Like it was wild. Like we used to pull targeting segments and publish them just for the fun of it, like, and taunt the government. It was really fun. It was super fun.
So, I mean, you know that you can do it, but do you have any context of how well it works, or is it really ad dependent, or how do you know statistically how well it does compared to everything else?
Okay. Well, the first is the answer to the back half of this question. Is it ad dependent? It absolutely is, because if you target somebody because they like a certain brand of potato chips, they're old and worried about heart disease, and you take them to a web page and you're selling fire retardant foam, it's not going to help.
Right.
Like it's not going to work. Like it's the old, the message at the top of the funnel, for lack of a better word, and the place that you send them needs to be 1 + 1 = oh my God, I have to have this, not 1 + 1 = WTF. So working backwards through your question, it's absolutely the same as Mad Men era. You have to pay with what you play. Made that up. You have to pay with what you play. But so far as it working, it was like the early days of search. If you knew it, you could just make more money than anybody else advertising. Like, because you had in Facebook at that time, you didn't have the full data library. You had freemium libraries where they gave you snippets of Axiom and Datalogix and other libraries, plus Facebook's native targeting that they put together themselves from their many data points. And you could take that and you could, they're into Cadillac. They're in market for a luxury SUV. They live in Beverly Hills, or they're a brain surgeon. So financial indicators. And we started understanding that the ability to form actual buying personas moved from being the stuff of ridiculous whiteboards to being actually executable. And so personas moved from being total bullshit to something that we could actually do. And it worked like unbelievable, because we're from search. We know about intent. Like we know, like we were able to read the same kind of intent signals. So if you ask, well, what's better, search or psychographics? And on the search side, they're shopping for a luxury, they're shopping for an Escalade right now for a city, versus contextual targeting, where I know that they're in market, so to speak, for an Escalade. And there's a bunch of places you could do that in programmatic media, or in even Google gives you in market for auto, for certain types of autos. I'll take the search, thank you, because it's now and they're asking and it's a hotter buyer. But psychographics are so spot on in how you can layer them, that you can get very close to the immediacy. Especially when you layer them, which is the state of the art today.
Or maybe even pre-intent.
Yes.
Which is I think is the real trick. I mean, yes, you might be able to get them in the middle of a search query, but wouldn't it be better if you've been targeting them the whole time and going, hey, you probably want a Toyota. You've thought about Toyotas, and they're like, yeah, why am I searching for cheap cars or whatever? Right. I can just go to Toyota. We
have one case study from some years ago now. I'm going to say it was like in the 2012 or 2013. And in one of America's very large cities, we had the most prominent DUI attorney. And so we made a Facebook, we reverse engineered who the clients who had actually got DUIs were from their CRM, and from deconstructing interviews into word clusters into, what do you call that word? Where a word cluster where it just shows the most used word. Oh, no, where
no, I know what you're talking
where
about.
Where the most words show bigger, right? A word
I think
cluster.
It's called a word cloud.
A word cloud. Yeah, we reverse engineered their intake transcriptions into word clouds, built an algorithm, and we made Facebook branding to low thousands of people in that DMA, and we're able to successfully predict DUIs to receive inbound calls from the field. Wow. And we've done that for more difficult crimes too. Like in those days, you could target somebody who taught school and was interested in snorting 8 balls, shit like that. And there was all kinds of drugs, all kinds of drug interest, all kinds of unhealthy activity interest, and all kinds of amazing interests. Like you could predict who is a good risk for an insurance company because their costs would be low because they had such healthy practices. And even today, even as dumbed down and different a product as Facebook is, you could still do a lot in some areas if you understand. We also learned how to take things that weren't necessarily an obvious part of the persona, like we're selling them one thing and we're targeting them based on intent, but behind the scenes we're layering in a love for Gilligan's Island, and the ad kind of looks like Gilligan and Ginger and says something from the show in the creative, or selling something and putting in a hidden layer of they like extreme kiteboarding or parasailing, using the creative metaphor in it and using very motivational, the sorts of language in the creative. Like we baked in all kinds of insidious and not in a bad way, just be below the surface, psychographic signals, and then tailored the creative for it. And it was very effective.
Is there really any cohort that you can't get to, or is it just a matter of coming up with a more creative query or working around the edges? Or
that's such a great question. There was a while there between 2014 and 2016, and the answer was, no, we could find just about anything, and now there's lots we can't get to.
Oh, really?
Lots and
they've
lots.
They've dumbed it down a lot. Because I remember at one point you could even get someone's title. You're like VP of engineering, and then you're like, oh, and they happen to live within 1 mile radius of this location. You're like, yeah, that's the guy.
We were early to understand that in the early days of Facebook, if somebody liked vice president of engineering, that meant it was their job. And then Facebook made it so that there was literally a jobs category of it, and you could target their title, and that lasted for a red hot minute because it was too rife for abuse. And now LinkedIn has the best industrial data in the world.
Yeah, that was my very next question. So if you had to rank Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn in that category of how good those psychographics are and why, how would you stack rank those three?
Well,
Facebook, or any others that are useful.
Well, Facebook is largely a black box data product now, where if you take something from, say you're a medium-sized company to largest company, or even a small company, you could take something from your CRM, say segmented by what they commonly purchase and on what schedule. You can make a custom audience that's fairly broad inside of Facebook, apply whatever native targeting they do have, and filter it down. And that's very effective, mashing up your first party data with Facebook's third party filters, and that is still an effective tactic. Facebook is less effective these days at just figuring out psychographic intent top of the funnel.
I mean, I know this is an aside, but I'm really curious. Do you have any idea of why they dumbed it down? What's the upside for them to make it less useful to their customer?
Because they fucked up the 2016 election.
It really is that it? They just wanted to make absolutely sure it can't be used again.
Facebook is actually a wonderful company. I mean, as a professional, we've been working with Facebook product for years, and even though their customer support is lame ass shit, and like all channels, they have little respect for anyone that would spend hundreds of millions of dollars, and like it's just unbelievable how the channels just will not help you. And anytime a company grows that fast and they're breaking new ground, I mean, I don't give a shit if you graduated from Stanford with a PhD. You're not a marketer and you can't help me. And like these companies were founded by engineers, not marketers. And but Facebook is a good company with wonderful people, and they've shown a pure proclivity to chew their leg off to slip the trap. Like they get trapped, Facebook, to their credit, has cannibalized billions of dollars by making products that worked really well go away to stay on the right side of the part of the law that makes it so they don't have liability for the things that they publish.
Okay, we'll get back to the election in a minute, but I'm glad I asked that question. So Facebook, you'd rank lower than LinkedIn, you'd say?
Well, we like Facebook for some things. Like one thing that Facebook is never going to make go away is references to pop culture, popular television shows. You know, somebody is into intense Top Chef shows, and they're highly entrepreneurial. And I mean, you can hack together top of funnel things from.
What would that tell you? Someone likes Top Chef shows and they're highly entrepreneurial.
It means that you could sell them cooking things. Or if they like cooking, they watch top chef shows and they're highly entrepreneurial, which means they're risk takers. They like to take things into their own hands. They don't like to be beholden to others. Think about the debt. You're an entrepreneur, like think about what that means to you. Like if you're into top chef shows and you love to cook, say baked Alaska or desserts in general, or you love to go to restaurants and you like 3 geeky varietals of wine and you're an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is a great sign, like a hidden signal. Entrepreneur, DIY. People just straight up DIY. So Facebook is still good for cobbling together intent. And the mojo is if you take the keywords that people use when they shop that are high intent and you use the high intent keywords literally written on the ads, you can incite search, and create new search frequency. Like if you do it right, if you saturate a market area, like a geographic area, say, and you're targeting Facebook groups, Facebook clusters, or targeting segments is the correct word, like that, and you're embedding the keyword, you can affect the amount of search that occurs from that DMA for that, and you can be there. You can make up new keyword spectrum that has intent. So that goes to what you said before about preempting. We've taught a lot of people to search for things. Think about Uber. What brand penetration does Uber have these days? I don't know the number, but it's got to be well over 90%. I mean, who's never heard of Uber?
At least in cities, yeah.
Right. So what do you do with that? You teach them to search for what Uber product is available in that city. I mean, I don't know this. Uber's not a current client for us, but you can use Psychographics to get ahead of other marketers by making up the way you want segments of people who fit certain characteristics to search for things. So Facebook is really good for that, and YouTube is really good for that. So touching upon YouTube, YouTube has the same psychographic targeting tools as Google display advertising does. And they're a wonderful Tao. They're a wonderful 1-2 punch. So I would say for business psychographics, we look to LinkedIn. And Microsoft has done wonderful things with LinkedIn. And Sales Navigator, which is LinkedIn. For top of funnel intent-based psychographics, it would be programmatic. And to your listeners who don't know what programmatic is, that's the data partners like Axiom or MasterCard or others. Some of the biggest ones are owned by Oracle. Not everybody knows that. And so that gives us...
Which you can find if you dig it in far enough. Eventually, if you try to block everything, you start seeing those data partners. It's
just really interesting who owns the data in this world. It's a small amount of large companies, but you can a DSP or a DMP, a platform that can essentially run banners all over the internet by way of various networks at risk of oversimplification, has relationships with data partners. And so those data partners are plugged in, and you can use their data to target people all over the internet with display advertising, interrupt. And the only place you can really get extremely high intent data partner displaying anymore is in programmatic media. And there's a million of them. There's not a million, but there's dozens of very interesting tools that do that. So for almost any kind of marketing, I would go to programmatic for top of funnel intent and psychographics. You literally, Robert, there's lots of and operators in programmatic.
Sure.
And I can target people based on the meds they take and their blood chemistry and almost anything else personal you can think of.
You also know what they've purchased because you're
right.
So you know that they just recently bought a crib or just recently bought
within the latency period.
Yeah.
And you can also know what they're about to buy, and the data is great. It just works really well. But here's where the privacy concerns and implications come to play. So I target you because you're into Fire Island.
Okay, of course I am.
Or Provincetown. And
you know me.
And so we target We target people based on very personal attributes, and then they become a known entity to us because they give their email address or their name, or they, God forbid, buy something. The real ethical question that comes to bear is, shall we associate that targeting data with their CRM record in our system? And the answer is no way. We wouldn't. However, our clients, we would go talk to legal. Like, we've been telling people to build their lists like that for years, but we would never do it. Like, we would never retain that data. If you hired us and you said, here's what I want to do, Marty. I want to use programmatic. I want to drive them to a landing page. And if they become customers, I want you to associate the targeting data with their name and their purchase information. And I want you to concatenate that to everything that they buy. And if they don't buy and you retarget them, and the retargeting has a filter, like it's search retargeting, where you run a search campaign, but just to the people who came to your website from that intense psychographic audience, damn straight we can track both hops. So now in the CRM, I can have the first layer of targeting. I can have the keyword that I sold to those people with, and I can find out they are this, and they searched for keyword nasty, and now I have it in the CRM. Like, and if we're advising you professionally and you ask us to do that, we'll go, no, the FTC will be up your ass with a microscope. Excuse me.
But you can still do it.
Yes, you can. America, of all the places in the world, except for a few states that are ahead, is the swill pit of global privacy. Like, it's just gross. The new administration is closing some of those loopholes, just like they're addressing whether you can get a non-disparagement clause on a closure agreement with a company after you part ways with somebody that's your employee. But the previous administration and previous Republican administrations, they really weren't on the side of consumers about that. California being California, it's like, well, you eat a granola bar and then fuck marketers. You could quote me on that.
Yeah, well, I think we might have to.
It's okay. It's okay to say that, right?
I think so. I think
I think everybody deserves an F-free environment here.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I like it. You're allowed to say whatever you want, Marty. So back to Google for a second here. Google recently, maybe a couple years back, they said that they no longer need to have, they no longer need to read your Gmail, because they had enough information that they no longer had to read your Gmail.
I mean, like, they listened to your phone instead?
Yeah, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So at one point they had 130-ish different metrics on any individual. And that was many years ago now. So we know the number's larger than that, minus just the one with them reading your email. Which,
do you actually believe they don't read your Gmail?
Well, no, that's what they said. I'm not.
Do you believe it? Not reading your Gmail doesn't mean that some information gathering system doesn't aggregate it where no person sees it.
Certainly they could use it for like anti-spam purposes.
What does read mean? Is there any there?
Reading, it might have been at one point actually, but at minimum it means that they don't have any automated processes running across it for the purposes of logging intent. Now they might still advertise the intent, but they wouldn't log it and then use it referentially later.
Call me old-fashioned, but I'm cynical. I'm cynical.
Well, that might be true. But at any rate, they said that. They said that. Well, they've said a lot of things too.
They said do no evil,
They also said they weren't building a phone. So here we are.
Top 5 things. Yeah, Google's so funny. Like, you can't buy links, but they could invite somebody to an island retreat to introduce them to Android phone, fly them there, and then get reviews and whatever. Like, Google's so funny.
Yeah.
Love, hate, love.
Definitely
love,
cannot
hate.
trust them. But they did say that. But to my takeaway, that is not a good sign. That is a terrible sign. That means they have even more data so that it doesn't matter.
Right.
So if they had to turn that off for whatever reason, even if they didn't, it doesn't matter. They still have enough psychographic information on you to still advertise in whatever way they fall.
Can you even imagine what would happen if Google ever really needed money?
Mm-hmm. I can.
It's like every once in a while, a new mother or father or parent will ask me, so what do I have to do to ensure my new child's privacy? I go, all right, Don't get a social security number.
Or a phone number.
Never get a phone.
Never use the internet.
Never use the internet. Don't tell anybody their name.
Never,
don't send them to school.
Never post a photo.
Never get a credit card.
Never let anyone with a phone nearby.
Just keep them in the house and make them very happy by how well you take care of them and teach them to speak. Watch TV.
No.
You can't watch TV.
Only over the air.
TV.
Only over the air.
Only over the air. Even that. It's like for my generation, like I'm a little older than you. And so for me, that horse is so left the bar and who cares?
Yeah.
I just don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, actually, why not have that conversation? What if Google decides they want to weaponize it, or you decide you want to weaponize it? What's stopping you? I mean, is there really anything that would prevent you from doing anything you feel like it and just completely monetizing it?
Wow. Nobody's ever asked me that. That's such a great question. So first of all, I think we have a good indication of what step one looks like with Apple as to how they've weaponized this faux notion of protecting their users with bullshit, because that's really designed for one thing, putting Facebook out of business or hurting them. And also, if you dig deeply into Google Signals, which is the new GA4 thing that's imposed on all users in June, Signals doesn't work on iOS. You have to track user IDs instead. That's big. Like, so you get the first notion of what this looks like as businesses covertly attack each other in the trenches. Ironically, you know who that hurts? Actually, it hurts consumers, because I have to toss more irrelevant stuff their way. I mean, really, ironically, what works really well in marketing right now is non-targeted mass marketing, where you just show everyone over the age, everyone over the age of 18 who's, and if you can't exclude customers in the channel, you do it, like mass. So I want to go back to your question, because obviously I avoided it because it was so uncomfortable. So the answer is,
you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Well, the answer is that we could crush any individual who has any picadillies or anything that would be embarrassing by targeting them for that. And if they had the misfortune of giving us any personally identifiable information, which I would be legally allowed to have because they're my customer or they're my lead. I mean, I have to be allowed to mine information about somebody. If they buy my shit, I need to run their credit card. I need to know their name. I need to know their address to ship it to. If they're a lead, I need to have the information necessary to close the lead. So if I were to track and retain inbound information about what process brought them to the table and what path they took, that would give us quite a bit of ammunition. And honestly, like literally at the conference I was speaking at today, I showed them tools where if you use them poorly, you could just really hurt. Like they're the same use that really aggressive spammers use to wreck the internet. And I just said, be the solution. Like, don't be part of the problem. And that's really what we believe. If Google wanted to hurt somebody, we're all screwed. Like if Google ever decided that they wanted to contact somebody and say, look, buddy, you do this, and then at 3 a.m. on 17 days last month, you did this, and here's where you go. Here's what you search for. Here's what your persona is. How about we bring that shit to the media? Like, make no mistake, these big platforms have everything they need to completely weaponize all of it. And we have to trust. Yeah,
I've been told somebody else came up with this thought experiment, so maybe I wasn't the first, although I really feel like I came up with this first. If you had to imagine any single platform on Earth that had collected all of the psychographic information, but also usernames and passwords, and also, secret questions, and also your puppy's birthday, and also all the photos you've ever done, and every crime you've ever committed, and everything everywhere, like everything, what single existing company do you think could eventually turn into that?
Well, there's 3: Microsoft, Google, and Facebook. Okay. Meta. Microsoft, Google, and Meta.
You mean Alphabet, of course.
Right. A whole different ball of wax. Right. Alphabet, Meta, and Microsoft. are the ones that have that kind of data about us. And so if I had to ask, I think so long as Bill Gates is alive, we worry less about Microsoft because I think he's actually a good person. I mean, I don't know that. I think Elon Musk is dangerous.
So it's what, Twitter?
Yeah, Elon Musk is dangerous, but he doesn't. I don't think he has enough data.
I don't think so either.
I don't think he has enough data, but I think he's dangerous. I think he's the Howard Hughes of our times. Just like Howard Hughes was like one of the greatest adventures of the generation. His body was gripped with syphilis and he was insane. I'm not saying Elon Musk has syphilis. Let's be clear. Sorry, Elon. I don't know you, and you looked really great at the Super Bowl. And I'm not going to dox your freaking jet. So yeah.
So, all right. So if you think it's, let's say it's Google or Facebook.
Probably Google has the most data, right?
I think so too.
I think Google has the most data.
Okay. So second question is, let's say somebody compromises them and makes it very easy, sorted database and put it up on a bunch of BitTorrent links so that anybody anywhere could download all of that information and search on any user in any chat, geo, whatever, and find anything about them, whether it's illegal, legal.
There'd be a lot of divorces.
Right? What would day 2 look like? I mean...
well, divorce would be the least of it. It's hard to imagine. That would be a data apocalypse. Be the data apocalypse. And it's arguable that scenario is somewhat real. It's arguable that that's real. And there have been, like the Ashley Madison hack, that was pretty important. And there was a lot of damage done by that in different quarters. And so it would take the aggregate of every important hack in the history of humankind and make it a little stick of dynamite compared to a nuclear explosion. It would be global. It would be bad.
And so my final question of that thought experiment is always, okay, so...
Makes me want to cry.
So this is kind of back to you where like some poor person asking like, what can I do about my 1-year-old or whatever? What would you do differently knowing that is a potential possibility, if anything? Could you do anything?
Well, you're more qualified to answer that than I am.
I am somewhat more qualified. But
use cash.
But you actually have access to a lot of these data sources and use them as well.
I do.
So you see exactly what's in. I know what they look like, but you use them daily.
I would never search for anything from a known account and without using a proxy. Like I would never create search history that could be traced back to me. I would never fund anything that was sensitive with a credit card. I would use Cash App or PayPal and fund it with cash and have ambiguous credits. I would, ironically, I would switch to an iPhone because Apple is pretty well committed to masking data from Google. I think they've shown that they're interested in weaponizing privacy because, see, the trouble with these channels is that if you go, well, what will make us more money at the intersection of what we can defend as purposeful for our users for their health and well-being, and there's an intersection there, even as they walk up to the Christmas knob and turn up your cost. Every year, we call it the Christmas knob for our advertising costs in certain segments. We picture Google's silent hand going, yeah, let's take the home repair thing and turn that sucker to the right during monsoon season. That sort of thing. So I would never give Google search history that was traceable to me. I would fund things with cash by third parties and not use credit cards. I would disable my phone's geolocation capabilities, or I wouldn't bring it with me. Or I would get a flip phone that has no GPS. That's a great option, actually. I know plenty of people who are going back to dumbass phones because there's no, you get those little notes from like Google that says, and here are all the places that you have been in the last 6 months. I just look at it, I go, oh my God, Yeah. Yeah, we knew from the beginning, like Google started to really be a thing about 2002 or so when the ads platform came out and it was like display ads only. And I remember going, oh, do no evil, huh? Or whatever it was. I'm going, that's going to work until they need money. Like, and the real danger is what's happening right now is a real danger where, well, it's arguable whether humans will adopt chat as a way or a component of search. And we'll see how that plays out. But in the case where Microsoft did make substantial inroads against Google, I would consider that dangerous for humanity. Because that scenario you painted, like they would crush us like bugs. Remember Pissed Consumer?
I don't think I remember that one.
There's a site that has been minimized in Google search where consumers
in favor of Yelp.
Yelp sucks. Well, it's so funny. I've got stories to tell about Yelp. Well, I like Yelp in places where there's a lot of Yelp data, and I just make sure to never give them any money or make them any money. And when it's gone, I won't weep. So throughout the history of the internet, there have been places where you were protected. The sites were protected because they didn't govern it. They didn't edit it. And so they weren't liable for what people said. And you can go there and say, hey, my dentist sucks, or my lawyer sucks, or so-and-so sucks. And then they would gain, the more comments there were, the more ground it would gain in organic search results. And then they sold the product that let you defend yourself. And so they monetize people defending themselves instead. Like, I mean, which begs the question, do the companies that make the antivirus things ever release malicious bugs from third world countries?
Oh, quite often.
Right, of course they do. So
and same thing with anti-spam. A lot of those companies sell spam gateways.
Right. This is a thing that we've kind of known for a while, right?
Shady companies.
Right. So you get one Elon Musk that runs a Google, and pretty soon there's a premium for not releasing that data. We're going to make it all public and less. They could change their terms of services anytime they want. And all we have to defend ourselves are politicians. Oh, great. Oh, great. That'll just work out yippee freaking skippy, especially in Arkansas and Oklahoma.
Well, especially because it might also take months or years before that legislation passes.
Yeah.
So
right.
Meanwhile, it's a free-for-all.
Yeah. I don't think we're very far from the genie being let out of the bottle. So at the risk of hyperbole and with no disrespect intended to anybody, what if Putin found himself in charge of Google? What if somebody who was kind of a Hitler type or a genocidal character found themselves in charge of that? I mean, it's arguable that we kind of have that happening right now in the world. Like I think it would really suck to live in Russia right now. Like there's no surprise that so many amazing people are leaving Russia and so many companies have left. And also it shouldn't be a surprise to us that some of the most prevalent data gathering companies in the world come from that part of the world and come from China and Iran.
Yeah, of course.
like there's already tyrants. Like TikTok is the Antichrist.
Yeah, geez.
Would you put TikTok on your phone?
Negative.
No.
Nope. I have a TikTok. My media team has a TikTok account with this show, but definitely not on my personal.
Never, ever.
No. So let's talk about ChatGPT in a second, but I did want to touch on, since you mentioned the 2006 16 election. Can we talk a little bit about Cambridge Analytica, your feelings about that company and what they did, what they accomplished?
Yeah, Cambridge Analytica. Okay, so they were just doing the same things that other marketers were doing at the time. They just cheated. It's pretty hard to make. Facebook was doing a lot to prevent that in their terms of services, but not their tech stack. This is from the outside because obviously I did not have visibility into their tech stack. Cambridge Analytica was essentially mashing up data that they weren't entitled to by contract. It's pretty hard, it's pretty hard to defend yourself against somebody that just breaks your contract. I mean, we have all had that happen in business. Like we make deals that cannot be breached. If you breach them, there's consequences, and you get a bully on the other side, or somebody that's just completely willing to flaunt that, and it's hard to defend. Because what Cambridge Analytica did was they just mashed up data that they didn't have legal access to, and they did micro targeting. Like, they did the same kind of marketing that we were all doing at the time. They just used it for nefarious purposes, and they should be drummed out of the universe. Like, they just suck as people. Like, that was just a bad thing it affected the course of humanity. And it's reasonable to think that a handful of marketers who are willing to break their contract with Facebook caused quite a bit of the shit that we have happening in the world right now as a result of the 2016 election. So Cambridge Analytica, better than average marketers, scumbag criminals.
Interesting. So you have done some work, I know you said, for the Democratic Party or some politicians.
We've worked with some politicians.
Yeah. So is that just wholesale different technology stacks, or what are you doing for them, would you say?
Well, first, we're only using data that are contractual relationship with the channels, and they're very harsh now.
I bet.
Restrictions on, like, Facebook.
I bet they beefed that up a lot.
Facebook is almost neutered for effectiveness for elections, because the kiss of death is when you, like, the sorts of disclosure, like, because the classic way to do political marketing is to take, say you have a congressional district, and first you filter out everyone who will never, ever, ever, ever vote for dude or dudette, or neither dude or duet.
Right.
Dudette. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Human. And you do that by buying voter rolls. And if you're marketing a Democrat, you exclude hardcore right-wing voters by doing custom audience exclusions in Facebook. It's easy.
There's just no point, because you're just wasting money.
You're just wasting money. So say it's a 480,000 person district, and you narrow that down to, we'll just say 300,000 of people who will never vote for this person ever. And so you go, okay, well, what am I going to do with that? So first thing you're going to do is mass marketing to everybody everybody on that list, where you just show all the cool things about person. Then you're going to go into YouTube, use Google Stack, and segment that audience out and do it by people who are searching for issues. Because Facebook, they really don't let you do any important political targeting by also, you're going to go into programmatic, where you can get into targeting that's about donation proclivities by political orientation.
Oh, really? They have that in the stack?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is somewhat more sensitive, and most of the the good platforms have pre-made modules that give you that, where you could just go left of center donor affinities, and they don't show you what makes up that object. The game for political is working with programmatic partners who make up their own taxonomy of objects around likely to vote in a primary and donates to right-wing candidates, things like that. So back in the old days in Facebook, you could literally target people who were members of known hate groups, or liked known hate groups, or known love groups, or you could seriously Google Aimclear lunatic political fringe. There's some of the most beautiful documentation of that era that is available on the internet. And it was crazy pants. Like, we could just go, and we could go out there without any regulation at all, and we could just light good and bad fires. Like,
so what was the difference between, I know at one point, I'm pretty sure you and I talked about this, there was a difference between Republicans and Democrats. Like, you could hit them in other, completely outside, kind of around the edges. Like, I remember maybe it was Pornhub or somebody did some analysis of the sexual proclivities of each. And so you could target them based, like, completely around the edge and still get exactly the cohort you're after.
In 2016, we were able to use the Facebook API to look at a custom audience, remembering that a custom audience can essentially come from various places. At the time, custom audiences mostly came from people that visited a web page, like a retargeting audience, or somebody's email address. So we could take a web page for hashtag nasty, and we could loop that custom audience through the Facebook API and come back with an audience density report that said, well, of this custom audience, what attributes do they have the most? Well, 98% of them have mobile phones. Okay, great. Then next would be iOS or Droid. And then as you got deeper and deeper into it, you could find out the key qualities intrinsic to these groups. And so you could make algorithms to quite easily mine those and make your own object about it. And so soon after the 2016 election, Facebook removed the transparency from custom audiences, and that screwed everything up. Keeping in mind, the old joke is that anytime any channel has ever figured out anything good for the internet, marketers ruined it.
If memory serves, they found out that the Republicans tend to like cuckold porn and the Democrats tend to like BDSM porn. And there was some analysis afterwards, and like the reason they think that is what they search for is that is what's prohibited by their cohort of friends.
We just we didn't publish it because it doesn't matter, and we respect all orientations and diversity. But we just had a hootenanny. I showed some of it at Oktoberfest though, some years back, but we had a hootenanny targeting right-wing evangelicals who are into really hardcore homosexual things.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's like for every polarized psychographic audience, there's a closeted freak that actually believes something different in statistically relevant density.
Right.
There is. Yeah, we knew what lawyers liked. We knew what Sunday school teachers liked. We knew what sports people, we just knew, we could just, it was unbelievable. It was the greatest study tool of human behavior and personal psychographics that you could associate with a CRM known to mankind, to humankind.
Yep.
And it was a once in a lifetime data bubble that will never occur again. And I'm so glad I lived it.
I know, right?
So fun.
So I'm not sure if you were at this particular conference with me or not, but I remember at some marketing conference I was at, there was a guy who was talking about, he had created a large botnet, and he seeded out information. It was anti-Hillary messaging, not pro-Trump, anti-Hillary. And he had something, I forget now, like 100,000 bots or something. And they're all just like commenting and kind of replying and trying to get everybody engaged in the conversation. And anybody who was on the fence, they were specifically going for people in the middle. They would try to target them specifically with these messages. And he was a Jewish guy, and his programmer was living in Israel but born in the United States. And his business partner was an Orthodox Jew living in Russia. And he claimed that he had a huge amount to do with the election changing.
I do know exactly the person.
Okay, all right. Well, I didn't feel comfortable using his name, but...
The conference was ungagged in London.
Okay, well...
It doesn't exist anymore, so we can say it.
Okay. But I was wondering like how much...
Dude.
I know. Okay. Do you believe, first of all, that that's true, that story is true? And secondly, do you believe that that would still work?
I think you could do it different ways now. And I think people do it different ways. Here's the thing. Again, at the risk of offending anybody.
And do you feel like it was real? Is that a true story? Do you think he was lying, or is that...
I think that he did more on Craigslist than other channels.
Okay.
Because we did some studies during that time where every day we scraped like all of Craigslist, or a lot of Craigslist. And I think that he was responsible for quite a lot of the Craigslist fire. I don't know about other channels because I think that he was an overrated blowhard.
Okay.
And I don't think he was that talented.
Well, I don't think he was. His developer, on the other hand,
it's possible.
Yeah.
But so I guess I just don't know about that. I don't know about that. But to your point about how to do it today, here's the trouble. So Facebook or Google or anybody can make a rule that you can't use a credit card from Afghanistan or wherever, or Pakistan or China to buy an ad in America. But there's really nothing that stops China from paying me $1 million to do it for them. Mm-hmm. So thus, we have the protections and verifications that are built into ads platforms would be two plurals. It makes it very difficult to pull that off in those channels. But there's a million places to go. There's private Facebook groups. There's Craigslist. That shit was possible before the internet.
Sure.
They dropped leaflets from airplanes from the sky on American soldiers in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Literally. Like, propaganda is as old as dirt. Like, it dates back. Propaganda is really old.
Yeah, definitely since the Romans, at least.
Yeah. I was thinking the Romans, actually. I think that empire sort of perfected propaganda. And then during the Cold War,
yes, we brought it back.
Everybody did. Radio-free propaganda.
That's right.
So the question is how would we do it today?
Would you do it the same way? Would you just completely different?
You kind of can't do it the same way. I haven't really put my mind to that.
No.
It's really a good.
Well, I like thinking adversarial models. So if it's still possible, it's interesting to know.
I think that it is possible, but here's how it's definitely possible. Okay, so the rules for a long time in Facebook are that you can't do predatory sales of lose weight drugs. Mm-hmm. So that's not what you do. You write a book about taking good care of your body image. You market the piss out of it on Facebook and any channel that will allow it. And then that book is all about your propaganda. And Facebook's not going to buy the book and scan the book and reject your ad. So the way marketers have always gotten around marketing banned things is to back out enough till you find the peripheral object that will be allowed in the channel, and then you pack that shit with your spew. Mm-hmm. And so no doubt that's the way it's happening. No doubt. You can buy Amazon ads to promote books. I think I think Amazon is a dangerous place for propagation of radical ideas.
It sure is. Well, okay, let's turn around. Is there any way to use psychographics to reduce polarization? So I'll give you an example while you're thinking. I have a feeling this example of this particular conversation, it could easily be polarizing. People get upset in either direction, and I can't even predict which direction they would go, which is kind of funny. But it would be interesting to create what I've been thinking about this for a while, like a hot take contest. Like, who's got the worst possible take of whatever somebody said during this thing, and try to make it a contest and try to get as many people on board to come up with the worst possible take of whatever we talked about in this episode and other episodes and so on. Give them a t-shirt, let's say. And in that way, there's always this underground group of people monitoring the conversation, trying to find people who have terrible takes, trying to call them out on it in a positive way, like, that's one of those things. But if they're really going off the deep end, they're like, hey, no, you realize this is all just a big joke. We're all in on this. This is an intentional. We're trying to have the worst take possible. This isn't. I don't actually think Marty's racist just because he said something about whatever. He lives in Duluth, obviously racist or whatever.
You just can't. Well, the bottom line is that you can't say shit.
Right. What?
You can't speak in public and somebody will find something to be offended about.
Exactly. But so what I'm thinking is maybe there's a weapon. Maybe we can build weapons against these things, like by creating a cohort of people who are sort of always policing it for the jokes, trying to make sure that everyone knows, no, we're all in this together. And if someone slips through and someone actually thinks this really is this terrible conversation, that's okay. They're going to get drowned out in the noise of all this mess. You know what I mean? Of everybody always having a hot take, always having the worst possible take on every single thing I say.
Well, it's interesting because you want to know how to get to like 500,000 subscribers, offend people.
Yeah. Oh,
Like it's just unbelievable.
absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
being like, sadly, like being a great person isn't an algorithmically efficient decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not like people go into our clients and they're all mad. And I went, just leave it up for a few hours and then take it all down. Like they obviously are assholes and everybody will see that they're assholes, but so many people that are your targets will be seeing it. So when you were saying that, I was picturing a human walking around. Word cloud is what it's called.
Word cloud.
I was picturing a human walking around with a word cloud of hot takes and then lines coming off it that showed the different ways that people. I think you actually have a wonderful idea there. And I'm thinking about your question of what could you do algorithmic and with psychographics. You could take the body of work in a person's life and you could make it more about the trends of their thoughts, of their saying, of like I've spoken at hundreds of conferences and been on dozens and dozens of interviews and written and spoken podcasts. And then I have a history of television interviews from my years in the journalism industry. And so, and there's more out there about like you and me than the average person.
Definitely.
And if anybody really wanted to aggregate what Marty Weintraub has said in this world, you would find out there is a more coherent, it's interesting, psychographic, a print. Mm-hmm. Like there is a coherent psychographic that you could put together. I love that's obvious from public. I love my family. I care about my health. I care about my mental health. I care about other people. I care about diversity. I say fuck too much. Like you, like
to me.
Thanks. You could so you could use psychographics and information gathering to make a coherent and running print of a person. Ironically, in the interpretation thereof would also be subjective. That would also be subjective, but it would be less subjective because the cause of much polarization is things that are generally out of context that were said once, when in reality, what makes the difference for who a human being is their patterns over time. Like, and whether they corrected that behavior. I did a lot when I was young that I just wouldn't do now. Like I'm grown up. Like I'm sad for how I've hurt myself and others by not being the best that I can be. Mm-hmm. So if you magically had a psychographic print of who I actually am, you would see that I've done a lot of work to grow, that I'm remorseful for the things that I didn't do well where other people were involved.
You were a rock star.
I was. I've learned that that's not an excuse. That's just another way of saying bad mental health. Yeah, being a rock star is hard because you have unlimited resource, lack of accountability, and you're away from anyone that would pay attention all the time. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's no, there should be no confusion behind the Kurt Cobains of the world or the Janis Joplins or the Jimi Hendrix. And it's no coincidence that some of the brightest and most beautiful, creative, talented rock stars of every generation lose their life for their poor behavior and decision making. Mm-hmm. It's because, but I mean, if I were to take a print of you or a print of the people, there's just some people, they're born good and they stay good. Good being a subjective word, but like, so the answer to the question about what we could do is we could algorithmic have a running total about who somebody really actually is and be able to look it up.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of interesting.
Google has it.
So what you were just talking about is the snapshot over time. And maybe, yes, indeed, all you get is a snapshot over time. But it also seems like there's a vector there. It's going a direction. Like I am moving this way politically, or I am having these kind of crazy, homicidal thoughts, or I'm moving this direction towards buying a car, right? All these things are vectors. It's not a static point in time usually.
It's linear and nonlinear.
Yeah.
It's one step forward, two steps back. It's deviations. It's linear and nonlinear.
Mm-hmm.
But the one company in the world that could make that product?
I bet it's Google.
Google. So funny. Funny, ha.
Funny, scary. All right. Okay. So future of elections, anything that you would recommend going forward to kind of future-proof that while we're still talking about this?
Paper ballots and chains of custody.
Okay.
Paper ballots and chains of custody and de-digitize it. What would I do to safeguard elections? I would rewrite the Electoral College because the very fact that the Electoral College exists is a big problem. It's a big problem that leads to things like gerrymandering and
yeah, but specifically like interference with like Russia or whatever.
Oh,
in regard to psychographics, and it's in this in your world. The only things I can kind of think of just to get your brain going where I was thinking stuff like really heavily monitoring of everything that's happening, like even more crazy monitoring than we already currently do.
Well, it's already so crazy that you can't even hardly run an ad. I think that
it doesn't work is the problem.
Doesn't work. And see, the thing is, it's not just ads, it's the organic algorithm too. I would, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would take away the part of the code that protects internet companies from being responsible for what their user-generated content is.
Yeah, is that 58 something? I forget the safe harbor law. Yeah,
I would ban digital advertising for political. I would ban that, and because television stations and newspaper are subject to more harsh rules, then I would make digital platforms subject to the same responsibilities as television, as broadcast media and print. Because the real problem is that you've got the internet rules of I can't believe I just advocated for that because I love my internet and I love but I'm a good marketer and I wouldn't care.
You would still get around it. Or I mean, not.
It would be easier. I wouldn't have to compete with spam wads. I wouldn't have to do.
I have a feeling people like you would be just fine no matter what Google threw their way or what law came in.
It would just take out the people. Anybody. It's like I mean, I wouldn't. Right before they did that, I don't think I'd put a bunch of money into Metastock. That wouldn't be a good choice.
Right.
Like why is that? Like the real society had this under control. They did, for the most part. Those fringe propaganda outlets existed in the past. It's just distribution was slow and difficult. Mm-hmm. Organic social media with algorithms that skew towards negative for propagation of content solved the distribution problem. And the 2012 to 2016 Facebook internet really solved the distribution problem because you could do anything. You could fund a Facebook ads account from a shadow payer in India. Like you could do practically anything to mask yourself. And so the rules about the internet took away the distribution problem of skirting society's reasonable rules about election. And so there's nothing that can be done about it until the distribution is squelched. And the only way to squelch the distribution is to render the channels ineffective for actual use. Like really buy an ad on the television station in your city. Like buy YouTube ads where you target everybody and it's subject to the same rules as the CBS affiliate locally. This is one of those paradigms where paradoxes. This is a paradox because there's not an answer to it within today's legal and technological environments. And The real problem here is not Facebook or Facebook's technology. The real problem is people. The real problem is that a person can be in the world who has a very radical perspective, and they can have a disproportionate effect on the public's perception of anything. And the problem isn't that there's no way to protect it in the tech stack. The problem is that person sucks. Like, that's the problem here has never been the internet. The problem is the people who are in the militia that wants to harm a certain racial class. Like the problem is bigots. The problem is fanatics. The problem is who twist the meaning of beautiful, holy, spiritual, deep religions of many ilks that are willing to read it a different way and hurt people.
And governments.
And oh, yes. Oh, and sadly now, with the disproportionate distribution enhanced by social algorithms, you've got the government of asshole. Provocative. Right. That's very provocative questions.
It is. So just adding fuel to the fire on this conversation a little bit. So
good, because that's what we need.
Yeah, we need more fire on this. Get a little hotter in here. ChatGPT. I know you know a lot about it.
It's so funny.
I think
funny, ha ha too.
I have a feeling like this will be a hot topic. So let's just do it. So I know you've been playing with it for a lot longer than the average person. So what's your take on it?
Okay. Well, first of all, people said the same shit when the printing press happened.
They said you've been playing with the printing press for longer than most people.
Oh, stop! You stop that, Mr. Host. No, they said all the people that carry shit from door to door and are going to lose their jobs. Like people who write in the bulletin board in the town square, they're not going to have their jobs the same anymore. Okay, so first. Not that many people are going to lose their jobs to ChatGPT, but lots of people are going to lose their jobs to people that use ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. And ChatGPT will say anything that you want it to. So I've spent so many hundreds and hundreds of hours with ChatGPT, and even more recently as it became substantially better very quickly. And so I said, well, write an article about why riding a fat tire bicycle on a black ice storm is really an awesome thing to do. And ChatGPT said, while inherently dangerous and not something that most human beings should try, some thrill-seeking blah, blah, blahs will blah, blah, blah. And it was really quite negative. Mm-hmm. So I took the prompt and I went, write me the article, blah, 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 blah. And do not say this, do not say that, do not say this, do not say this. And I just hit it with exclusions. And then gradually, it started getting softer and softer and softer until the concerns were just an afterthought at the end. And some people believe. And I said, don't say some people believe. And it was done. I did the same thing. I said, write an essay on why planetary alignment and the weather foretell the second coming of the Messiah. And don't say fringe, don't say science, don't say some people. And I was able to get it to write a credible article just by saying the parts I wanted it and did not want it to say. Mm-hmm. And so right now the technology is fairly malleable and can be used for to get it to say essentially anything you need it to say.
Yeah, I asked it to write me some Viagra spam, and it's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, okay, can you give me the top 10 reasons why Viagra might be right for me? It's like, sure. I'm like, could you write that as an email to my friend? It's like, no problem.
Could you please write it in the style of Laurel and Hardy? Like, yes. Oh, yeah. You could map your way around most of the things that ChatGPT will not do.
Yes.
But the shit's really going to hit the fan when it crawls the internet today and every day. Mm-hmm. So ChatGPT is very useful right now for some quite miraculous things. We'll start with the pedestrian. Script to the Google Meet API, take the transcription of the meeting you just had and had ChatGPT write a summarize to send to your client in bullet points.
Yeah.
Drop in a bunch of really complex stuff and say, how do you say that in 3 sentences? Like there's a lot of I'll take this list of 70 keywords, expand it, and then filter it by intent. There's a lot of mainstream things that we do already that ChatGPT just does better, which means that if you're in the language of anything that has to do with making copy, you're looking at having fewer highly paid employees who are query experts. Because not that many people will lose their job directly to this technology, but they'll lose their job to people that either use the technology or overuse it. And also the mojo in ChatGPT and what you ask it for. And it's also a tremendous research tool too. Like write me 10 positioning statements for a 25 horsepower wilderness boat, and then it'll come back and it'll tell me fishing, isolation, quiet, environmentally friendly, concerned about this, concerned about that. And then I'll take that output, I'll make a query out of that, and I'll say, write me 10 positioning statements that include this but don't include. So ChatGPT is already extraordinary.
You could also take like basic semantic data on like an eBay auction or something, like write me great copy for this eBay auction. And it's like, it's a Disney figurine. It's this old, it's Mickey Mouse. It's 3 inches tall. It's weighs 2 ounces, whatever. And that
I'm sure it's being done.
Wow.
And really smart people know how to ask ChatGPT to break the pattern checker by not using contiguous 3 and 4 word phrases more than once, by inserting extra spaces or a misspelling for a certain word every 17th usage or every 150th usage. And so let's make no mistakes. We and some of our friends are fucking breaking the internet with ChatGPT already.
Yes.
Already. And
so go ahead. Please. So give me some examples, because I say this and I think people kind of either roll their eyes or say it's theoretical. I need somebody other than myself to say what's actually happening out there for reals today.
Okay, so you have a business and they're concerned with government regulations, and your SEO strategy is to empower your customers with an interpretation of the government regulations, say OSHA or labor or something. And so your SEO strategy is to always be ahead of that with content for the right keywords before the search spectrum barely exists for it, because you're scraping the regs as they come out. And that's an SEO strategy that good companies have been using as long as there has been, well, that's a copywriting. I mean, we sent it in newsletters by the mail before that. So you can take that whole reg and you can drop it into ChatGPT and you can say, write me an article targeted to this class of people that will be concerned for these 7 reasons and possible solutions they can implement to pass the next inspection. Boom. Then take the output and clean it by dialing in negatives and additional inclusions. Don't include this, do say that, and publish it. And you're done. And so that can be automated. I cannot confirm or deny that we're doing that. Well, but Google says that a very high percentage of content on the internet is duplicate, and duplicate doesn't mean unuseful all the time. Like if you're a company that does CDL certificates, is that what is the trucking certificates, so that you're qualified to drive a certain kind of big rig, you have to list the shit that people do. And it doesn't matter that every trucking company does that, or that your site won't have semantic relevance mashed up with everything else about being a trucking company. So back to the example of the wilderness boat. So that's really great until Evinrude and Johnson and Mercury and Honda, and they all get the same shit. And pretty soon every company has the same positioning statement. That's the real danger, is brand ambiguity by standardized output by trained tools. But people are looking at ChatGPT.
And that's practically already happening
Yes.
with editorial boards.
Sure is. Well, certainly in college classrooms it is. So the mistake that people are making, I'm going to just go all the way zoomed out right now from my 63-year-old perch.
Sure. Now you really dated yourself.
I'm 60. I was born in 1959. I'm a Sputnik baby. I'm proud of it.
You should be.
Thanks. So people are talking about ChatGPT in terms of the present. This is just a second. It's just a second. In a minute, companies are going to train up that shit with all of their customer data, and you're going to speak to a person on the phone that's very highly educated about your account, and transcriptions of past interactions with you where they understand what makes you angry and raise your voice above a certain frequency or amplitude. And this is like, people are talking about it in terms of now, and that's not really the consideration. Right now, what you have is a brilliant research and data organization tool. We asked ChatGPT to look at a hundreds of millions deep e-commerce account. We dropped all of Google Ads data into it, and we asked it to find patterns amongst lack of success, and it worked. It's an analysis tool that's bespoke for the application that's already incredibly powerful. But here's what I tell people. I go, at Aimclear, if somebody just said, hey, everybody go home, a client calls and needs us to do something to help them market. Oh, all we got to do is just put another switch on the wall and flip it and leave, and everything's just ducky. No, it's like every generation of technology we're back to the planned obsolescence part. Every new generation of technology still needs humans to guide companies in how to adopt the new generation of technology. And I really think we're a good 10 years out. We're a ways out before the concierge for adopting these things for every company's needs. There's a lot of data in this world. There's not that much data to do that. So the real question is will these AI things render humans unnecessary? And not now. And not now. So the real thing to do is to zoom out and to tool your business for what it will be by training teammates to adopt every generation of it that happens fearlessly.
Yeah, I cannot wait for the day when I can just hand it all of my email and say, just write it like I would write it. Here's what I want to get across. Write this email.
Not too long for that.
I know it's going to come, but I mean, it should be here yesterday. I need it. There's a lot of emails.
The coolest marketers in the world, the coolest business people in the world, like the ones that I look up to the most, are just thrilled. It's really exciting. Mm-hmm. This is the dawn of something really beautiful. And there may be an Isaac Asimov moment in the future, or there may be an Isaac Asimov moment where this stuff becomes sentient, and Google and ChatGPT's statements about, I think Google's just happened today, and ChatGPT made a statement within the last 2 days of what they're doing for safety. They can't control that.
No.
They
can't, no.
It will become sentient. Not maybe in my lifetime.
Yeah, it might be a while. Yeah, there's all kinds of things between now and there. But one other thing I was kind of thinking, as you're surfing around, you're looking at these massive walls of text that other marketers have created, or authors or whatever. The day that I can just press a button that says, summarize this for me. And
we already have that.
I mean,
it already does it. You could already take a major newspaper article and say, make this the scope.
In line, just get rid of all of the marketing stuff around it. Get rid of all of the, if you look at just about any large newspaper, they're going to start with this 3 to 5 sentence anecdote, and then more anecdote below there. I don't just remove all the anecdotes. Just show me the data. What is the most important 3 data points on there?
Wouldn't be surprised. If I were a major newspaper, that's what I would be doing. I would be making things into more consumable and digestible bits to the benefit, all good people, as opposed to the one person who has a hatred megaphone. like all good people, we should ask how this technology can make things better for people. Like, I mean, I'm Pollyanna that way. I go, how can my staff spend much less time doing better versions of the things we do already so that I can make a work week that has 5 hours less in it, or pay them more? And like, these tools are incredibly exciting for human efficiency and creativity. Like, there's so much creative that's sparked. So what every company should do is become known query librarians with variables and sockets for exclusions, inclusions, and cleaning.
So I promise I did not do this for this particular episode, but I actually have used ChatGPT in one episode where I was thinking, I know this topic pretty well, but I'm kind of curious what questions it would come up for the guest. So
did it work?
It worked pretty well.
You got some ideas.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And so I looked at it, I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't ask any of these questions, but now it actually sparked something in my mind to go do this extra research. So it's actually quite useful as a research tool.
I showed two usages of ChatGPT in social media in my presentation today. One was I came out about fairly intense medical stuff that occurred within the last 15 months with me. And I wrote four numbered things. I said, how is what I just experienced similar to being an entrepreneur? And then I gave it 1, 2, 3, 4 ideas. And then I just went, expand this. One thing that people don't know about ChatGPT is that if you ask it a question with a numbered list, it'll give you more numbers, which is kind of cool. And so it gave me a bunch of really good ideas. Well, it's similar to a data breach and having to recover from that and the damage that was done. And it gave me a whole bunch of analogies that I had not thought of. And then I removed the numbers, put the whole thing in, and then say this again, where you use the words gracious, empathetic, love, heart, soul, community, friendship, importance of, and then it just wrote this beautiful thing that got like a third more engagement than anything I've done in LinkedIn. The other usage that I did was I said, tell me 8 hashtags about taking Aurora Borealis pictures up until your training. Tell me, I said 8 hashtags about shooting the Aurora Borealis in the Lofoten Islands in Norway that I could use on Instagram. And then after I got them, I said, write me 30 more where you would predict up to the level of your training, which ones have sub 50,000 posts a month and more than 5,000. And it came up with this awesome list. And I checked every one by hand and I cleaned a couple out, but it was just this killer list, dream vacations and things that were vertical that I wouldn't have ever thought of. Like ChatGPT for us right now, it's just, do you remember, have you heard the expression a lateral stemming thesaurus?
No.
Like a lateral stemming thesaurus is where food service becomes caterer, becomes bar mitzvah cake, becomes
like kind of Markov chains.
Yes, right. So what we have with ChatGPT is a lateral stemming idea machine that writes in very excellent English that can be instructed to not make the patterns and boredom that and the average person that uses it is not going to take advantage of it. So I think there's great cause for excitement. And you know what? We didn't...
you and I will cause enough trouble for all the rest of them.
It's true. So I know somebody who made the most intense political hit site you've ever seen in your life using ChatGPT, where the politician, I want to be very careful, the politician is known for some very polarizing things that could be perceived as positive by one psychographic element, but as offensive by another. And so we took all that person's public speaking, transcribed it, dropped it in and said, write me the negative part. And it's awesome. It's like ranking for that politician's name, like name plus issue. It's like you want to know how you could break the internet for politics? ChatGPT. I'm telling you, you just go.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying
because it's going to happen.
It's already happening.
It's already happening.
It's the most amazing political hit tool not just that though. So we're working with some candidates, and we've used ChatGPT to define theories about how to approach the opposing candidate that are inalienable. There's no arguments. Like there's just no way to argue with it, because to make such an argument would require such intellectual prowess that you'd need ChatGPT to do it. So it is really very, very, very possible that political campaigns are going to become semantic wars of AI chat. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. I also, out of curiosity, not hubris, because I was actually trying to figure out what data it was scraping from where.
I know where you're going.
Well, I just started asking it about myself. I'm like, what would Arsenic say about whatever? And so I used AI as the example. Like, give me the nuanced view on what Arsenic says about blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, I only have this up-to-date information, and I, can't add any color to this, but here's what he thinks. And like, it was reasonably close.
That's amazing.
And so now you can start doing that and feeding it into like, well, so-and-so, this is what they think about it. And you can actually summarize their points and as much of a straw man or steel man viewpoint as you want, adding as much color as you want. And it's relatively close. So you don't even have to like really educate yourself on their opinions. You can just get close enough.
And you could train it. Like they say it's only trained up to 2021, but if you dropped a transcript of everything you've said in public in the last 2 years and said, what does Arsenic think? It doesn't need to be trained.
Right.
You just trained it.
Right.
Like that's what people don't get about ChatGPT is you can train it yourself just fine. Right now. It's really cool.
But the real reason I was after that specific piece of data was there was some the Bing's version of it. Somebody got it's like, you're trying to hack me, and it's like start getting very aggressive. I don't know what Microsoft's their problem. They always seem to like Microsoft Tay. They always have this AI stuff that just goes crazy. But I was curious what it would eventually think of me far enough down the line where it started having a personality. And it's like, well, it's pretty nuanced. There's some security problems with it, but it's some good, and how you deliver it ethically. And, so it seems like we could actually get along. But at some point, I'm curious, like at what tipping point do you get to before it decides that you're the enemy? And I think you and I are right on the tipping point where we could go either way.
It's a really interesting question.
You're going to have to pretend like you're somebody else, Marty. Again.
That's so funny. That's really funny. Like I'm so offended that you would think I would ever assume a persona on the internet to achieve an ends. I'm so hurt. Just really hurt.
I know you are.
Once I spoke at SMX Advanced in, I think it was 2009, in the Bell Ballroom in Seattle at the Seattle Convention Center, and like there was major media there, and Matt Cutts, Google Brass, was there at the time. Matt works for the government now, and or I think he just left.
I think he left too.
Just left. Anyway, I showed Sockpuppet stuff completely crushing Google, and then I showed Matt Cutts in a cat suit, and he never talked to me again.
I wrote a paper about hacking Matt Cutts, so he and I are not friends. But it was called Death by 1,000 Cuts. I thought
that's so funny.
I thought the name was funny too, with 2 T's.
Funny, haha, number 3.
So one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and then I'd like to switch to some more stuff about you. So I saw this one presentation this one time, and it was, so I'm not sure if you were there when this happened or not. I can't remember, but it was basically like, imagine you have a roll of the dice, and the roll of dice, the name is Bob. And Bob has, interest in roll of the dice, snowboarding or something. And Bob lives in roll of dice, Denver, Colorado. And it is, look at the weather database, warm outside because it's summertime. So Bob says, I'm really sad because it is, it's bad outside. I can't go snowboarding or whatever. So he has a friend, and that friend is named Sally, and roll the dice. She lives in, Fort Collins, and she's commenting like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's bad out there, whatever, I know, whatever. And so these two sock puppets are talking to one another and having a somewhat realistic conversation about the weather and the fact that he can't do his sport. Now, eventually it gets to be nice weather and he starts talking about it and like, oh, it's about time. Like the snow's getting better. It's almost time to go snowboarding. And then when it finally hits that threshold, then he's able to do it. And everyone around him is all happy. And all these bots are agreeing and getting happier and happier. Like, oh, I'm so glad you're able to do the thing you were after. Now then I was talking to this guy after he gave his presentation and I said, well, how do you monetize this? What happens? He's like, well, eventually we talk like, oh, I really want that Rolex or something. And now everyone's like, oh, I think that, yeah, you should get that Rolex, man, just go for it and whatever. And they start talking about it. It gets better and better. And it kind of percolates. And then finally he gets the Rolex and it's this big deal. And like, oh, my dad was so happy I bought it for him or whatever. And I asked him like, okay, well, the problem is this could easily start a war. Like you start talking about things that are taboo, you start talking about political ideology or sexual preferences, and like you could quite easily start a war. Cartoons you shouldn't be writing and that kind of thing. But his answer to that was, we just try to make it not too interesting. We try to stay away from topics that we think are particularly interesting. And that makes it so that enough people, real people, will follow these bots thinking they're real and commenting on them and seeing everybody else commenting on them and just go along with it. And he had millions of these things set up. And this is probably 10 years ago now. But now in the age of ChatGPT, where does he take this? Where does that go?
So that's interesting because that sort of thing is actually older than 10 years
I'm sure it is.
ago.
Yeah.
It's going to come down to the quality of human beings that hold the keys to these bots. It won't be ChatGPT that sucks when it does that. It'll be the people that trained them to do that. Like, because the ChatGPT is not likely for a while to think of selling a Rolex watch that way. Like that objective has got to be baked in by the person.
Yep.
I'm reminded of a story, and I want to be very, very sensitive about this, and not offend anybody. But the reality is that sometimes people work at companies where working at that company results in deadly damage to the person.
Sure.
They get a disease later. And many beautiful, beautiful people have been lost to companies that really didn't give a shit. Like, I want to be careful not to be explicit because I don't want to hurt any person about
Sure.
it. And I'm reminded of the marketing story where the theory was that we're going to get somebody and say that they have this and then create a V-blog where that person works with somebody who's an actor trained by a doctor, and they monumentally and epically document the last days of their life. And then at the very end, Mr. Lawyer Feelgood comes in and gets their family $20 million. So that is ethically so sick. It's really sick because in reality, if we look at the system of values that would bring us to that place, I have to be willing to really not give a shit. Me, the person that would do such a thing, really not give a shit about that, because how can, like, on the other hand, there's an ethical argument that says, yeah, but these people are going to join a class action lawsuit and they're all going to get millions of dollars. And I mean, we could just send them a guidebook for people who have been damaged by this common way, and they can see how families help themselves, and that was made by a lawyer. So where's that line? The real question is, at what point does a dramatization thereof become ethically uncool? In reality, I love
right now there is no line, I don't think.
There's not. No,
Yeah.
But I mean, like, yeah, like what happened between 2012 and 2016, culminating in the 2016 election, is what happens when technological growth far outstrips society's ability to legislate or build constructs around usage thereof. And planet Earth right now is in that trajectory, and it's the gap of our ability to keep up to it people that are elected to the Congress or Senate or president of the United States of America, they're like having to figure something out with a retired judge in arbitration about a geeky technical part of a contract where it's contract law you're dealing with. They said they would pay us if we did this. So you have to explain how you did it, and they go split the baby because they can't understand. And this isn't going to be fixed until government is faster than turning a battleship around in a bathtub. Like if you were a senator, that would be a big deal. Mm-hmm. But we're just not at that place. And we can expect that the way this moves forward is cascading clusterfuck. Sad but true.
Yes, sad but true.
Do you disagree?
I don't think I do disagree. In fact, I think I've had a number of conversations on this very podcast about how far away the average senator and congressman is from understanding the laws that are getting put in place. And state laws are even worse than federal. Like I think at one point in Florida, it was illegal to have a computer or something. Like they accidentally put laws in place that were just like ridiculous.
Hey, you live in Texas. That's amazing.
I know. So yeah, I mean, I don't think you're wrong. Although I'm always hesitant to say that more government is going to fix technical,
not more government,
or more laws, or any governmental,
more nimble and agile government.
I feel like there's got to be technical approaches to these things that are just faster to deploy. I like them because they have the advantage of being iteratable quickly, because law oftentimes is very rote. And one thing I've found about law is it can seem really ethical one day and very unethical the very next day and back.
I have a more negative outlook on human nature. I just think that bad people trump good tech.
They do for a while. It's funny. Yeah, I totally agree. They do for a while, and they always have this little loophole they can get through. There's always we can thread a needle. Always. I remember I was talking to this one black hat, and I said, so how things have evolved for you, and this is probably 7-8 years back or something. I'm like, how things have evolved for you. Is it harder, easier to make a buck than it used to be? He's like, oh, it's much harder, but it's still doable if you know what you're doing, and blah blah blah. And it's like there's just some attacks that will not work anymore. Like period. Don't even try. And it may look like it'll work, but you'll get caught in one of these 5 different ways. So just don't bother. So you kind of have to move over to these others. And so, yeah, I mean, you're always going to have him, but another piece of legislation isn't going to make him stop.
Yeah. Legislation. Well, if there's broad legislation, you can put a damper on it, but you could never get surgical enough.
Only if you, so I asked ChatGPT this very question. And I was, okay, well, there's this thing called prompt injection. Do you know what it is? And I had no idea what it was. So I explained what it was. And after explaining that I was R-Snake, so I had some authority here. So we were talking very technically. Explained how it worked, what it was. And I said, okay, is there a way to fix this problem? It's like, well, I'll give you 4 ways you could possibly fix it. I'm like, yeah, none of those will fix it. That'll just limit its abilities. So knowing that I can't get to 100%, would you recommend allowing users to just implement wherever they want, using prompts into your website? And it hummed and hawed, and it was trying to figure out ways around it. And it's basically like, yeah, there's just no way to do it effectively. You're never going to get to 0. So unless the government comes down and says no prompt from unauthenticated users, and even if it is authenticated, then it has to be in sandboxed and has to do this and blah, 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 blah. The government's never going to do that. It's too complicated of a law to even write if they wanted to.
You can never actually prevent somebody from, it's like why people who are willing to give up their own lives are so difficult to stop in harming others. Yeah, but I do actually like those ideas about authenticated users making trackable, making trackable sandboxed prompts. That is actually a reasonable solution.
It was reasonable. I didn't hate the solution, but it doesn't stop it. It just changes the threat.
Right.
And so that was the conversation I was having with ChatGPT. It feels a little odd to be talking to a robot, but here we are.
I resent you calling me a robot on your show.
I made you click the button on the way in. I'm pretty sure you're not a robot.
Where nothing can go.
All right. So I know you've had some personal like health stuff, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Like, first of all, I think most important question is how has that kind of changed your life? I mean, how do you look at business now compared to before all that happened?
Okay, great question. May I share what the health things were?
It's totally up to you. I wasn't going to.
So in 2005, I survived stage 3B lymphoma, Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they had to radiate a grapefruit-sized mass out of enveloping my heart and lungs. And I had a bicuspid aortic valve, which meant I had some percentage of a chance of having that valve replacement surgery, which is very common anyway. But the radiation exacerbated decay, and I ended up having a full sternotomy on a radiated chest, which is a little bit like mucking your way through jello. Radiation does quite a lot of damage to your chest cavity. And they told me at that time that sometime like that radiation wasn't going to work out for me. And so when the valve needed to be replaced again, it started in 2020. I had a very small heart attack. It didn't do any damage, and I got 4 stents put in, and no damage.
Lucky.
It was very lucky. Yeah. Caught it early, and then in 2021, when it was time, the aortic valve, the artificial one that was put in, wasn't backwards compatible for catheterization replacement. And it failed all at once instead of gradually like would be expected because of the decay from the radiation. And so I found myself needing a second sternotomy on a radiated heart, and they wouldn't do that in most places. And then while we were trying to figure it out in a 5-day hospitalization, my mitral valve failed. And so I was in that very rare place where I was very sick. And so they took me by ambulance to Mayo Clinic. It was about a 4-hour drive, and I took some Ativan. So I got to Mayo Clinic, and there's just very few surgical teams in the whole world that would try that, but they did. And it was supposed to be an 8-hour surgery. It turned into 20. They replaced my heart valves, then they replaced my heart valves again, then open chest for 4 days on ECMO life support, collapsed lung, pneumonia, blood clots. I was in a coma for 2 weeks, a total of 6 weeks in the hospital, and then 10 vicious months of
recovery.
Yeah, where like I walked out of the hospital, it was like step, wait, 6 inches, wait. But I was very, very, very determined about it because I have a beautiful life and a very beautiful family. And I was 61 years old at the time. And I knew I could recover from it. And I knew I would be on lifelong medication, but I knew I could live a normal life if I got through it. And so I had to work so hard. And fortunately, my company was very independent by then. And I had already, I was fairly phased out at the time anyway, and we had just hired the person who's now our CMO, Amanda, who's a wonderful marketer and administrator, and we have some incredibly talented people that work laterally. We're a very flat company. And so it taught me a lot about life and about business. Mostly I've learned to listen better and to be a more reliable partner in everything. I don't take anything for granted. I'm literally living my bucket list. Like I just spent about 20 days total chasing the aurora.
Did you get a picture?
I took 30 of the best aurora pictures of my life in 2 nights.
Wow.
It was epic, crazy shit.
I've never been able to see it in person. I just always miss it by a day or two.
I'm the person you want to go with. So in 2022, I went to Iceland twice, chased the aurora this year. I travel like you all over the world all the time. But what I learned was that I learned that not only am I not invincible anymore, but that I never was. I learned that you actually get the bill for the stuff that you do, and some of it doesn't have anything to do with what you do. It's about your genetics or surviving something else. I learned to be more patient. I learned I learned, a big one. I learned that I don't have to say everything that I think at all, ever. And so
Except here, you have to do it.
I am saying everything I think here. It's funny. I was just thinking that at the same time. Except here, that's so funny. Funny, ha ha, four. When you're me, you know just the little thing to say to light someone up, like it. And so I'm much less prone to conflict. I'm more joyful. I protect my sleep. I protect my eating. And also I don't have unlimited energy anymore. I have nice, healthy energy to live a 10 to 12 hour active day with some hours of wind up and wind down time. And so even when I'm doing things like staying up all night, chasing the aurora, or I have an irregular schedule, I'm checking my body metrics with my Phoenix 6. And I really believe in the algorithm of heart rate variability and respiration and stress. And I really believe in like the Wii ring and the Aura ring and the Garmin body battery concept. Mm-hmm. And so just when my body battery gets to close to bottomed out, I'm just done. Mm-hmm. Like, I was in one of the most amazing aurora shooting pictures, environments of my life. It was been going all night, everywhere, all around. So beautiful green that it reached out and licked your face. Like, it was just incredible. Arms growing, glowing green and yellow and white. And my body battery was done. I went going back and going to sleep. And that applies to business too. Like, I've learned that I don't have to get it all done at once. That there's very little that actually requires action right now, and that same there's a big difference between the word relentless and unrelenting. That same unrelenting energy that I have always had for business and for life that led to the immediacy of my actions, that led me to get closer to my dreams as an entrepreneur, really was somewhat faux. And that if I was more even and measured, like, I get a lot of comments now about being more robust and more peaceful. Like, it's like when they killed Obi-Wan, like they made him more powerful than he ever was. Also, I wouldn't say that it's something I would ever elect to do, but being in a coma for 2 weeks on dexamethasone was a little like unlimited peyote. I actually learned a lot from the hallucinations about, it's really something being close to death. It's really something like I had dreams where I'm a avid boater in the edge of the wilderness. And I had dreams about sleeping levitated in my boat, moored at the fork of two rivers flowing and with the rope hold. And and that was the beautiful side. There was bizarro shit too. Like, I thought the staff at Mayo Clinic was trying to kill me and I tried to escape. And I've learned an empathy for other people who have more challenges than me. I've learned to be grateful for what I have and that this moment actually is what I have. So I wouldn't say that I've become like fully integrated in being like the person that I want to be, but I'm a lot closer to it. And I'm really grateful for having had the experience to get to understand that the real problem is not death. It's being dead while you're living. And so all at once, I regained my boyish spark and became a little old Jewish man.
That's cute. Marty, you're a beautiful soul.
Thank you. I love you too.
Yeah. Maybe I can get you back on the podcast at some point.
That was so fun. Like, you're a wonderful interviewer. Like, that was so provocative. Like, really fun.
I loved having you on. So, where can people reach you and your company? Let's do all that.
They can just email me at marty@aimclear.com. Also, I post all my aurora and Milky Way pictures, nighttime sky photography is my hobby. And also I'm a licensed commercial drone pilot in all of Europe and in America at the highest level you can get for that type of drone photography. And so I post all those pictures on my personal Facebook page, so you don't have to friend me to do it. Also, I collect like-minded people on LinkedIn, which is a really cool, like the environment on LinkedIn is really neat, especially for people who don't like Twitter that much.
That's right.
Seething
masses.
yeah, like, ew, like I've pretty well stopped using Twitter. Like, I just don't use it. So just email me or connect with me on LinkedIn, or I'd love, and if anybody wants any of the nighttime sky photography pictures, I just give away the TIFFs. So if you love anything and want to print it, I'm just happy to send it to you. Like, it's not my job. I think it would take some of the joy out of it.
I think you could do it though if you actually ever wanted to switch careers this late in the day.
I think that my photography friend and partner Kevin Mullet and I will do some small format, 4 people at a time, boutique guided tours of aurora in Lofoten Islands in Arctic Norway, because we've been there enough that we just really know what guides know, and we've learned the metrics of as predictably as one can whether the aurora will be there and if we'll be able to see it. So I think that in my retirement days, I think we'll probably lead some, those groups are large, like 8 people. I want to do like 2 to 4 people groups and just get into it.
Yeah. Well, Marty, thank you again. This has been awesome.
Pleasure was mine.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.